Legends of Tomorrow Season 2, Episode 7, Invasion. Now this is, of course, is the finale to the Dominator 4-series crossover event, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. There was some stuff that I thought was missing with this episode, and mostly it was, oddly enough, it was the inclusion of Supergirl, because they had the scene really early on where they have Oliver, and he's like, hey, and it was kind of a funny thing because I was like, this is a really stupid idea, but within him doing the stupid idea, he's explaining why, like, even he knows that it might be a stupid idea. When he's like, hey, I'm basically trying to get something normal, so I kind of want you to back off a little. It made no sense whatsoever, but like I said, even within him saying it, he was explaining, like, whether it's right or wrong kind of doesn't matter. Basically, I'm just stubborn, and it's like, if you watch Arrow, it's like, yeah, that is 100% Oliver Queen, so it made sense for his character. It was just a really dumb decision that he would, try to ask Supergirl to be like, kind of back off. So she was out of most of the episode until, like, that final sequence. The other thing is that Jefferson wasn't really in this episode, and I thought that was a little weird. I was like, everybody had their moments and stuff, whether it was through this or for some of the characters like Sarah and Ray, they had big moments in the Arrow episode because that's where they started at. So, they got a bit of focus from that and stuff. And I was like, I know Jefferson doesn't have powers without Stein, and Stein had his own thing, of course, because he has, a daughter now. But I was like, it was weird that he just wasn't in, like, any scenes. It was like he just wasn't there. It was kind of weird. And he showed up kind of like at the end. Of course, he was there, as Firestorm in the ending sequence, and he had a super epic ending thing where they did the it's not transmutation, I forgot what it's called, but when they transformed the bomb into just a bunch of water. So I was like, all right, that was a super epic moment. So I guess him not being there, just that one moment kind of made up for his entire absence, because I was like, that was just a sweet freaking moment. But other than that, I actually enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a good finale to it. It wasn't as crazy as I expected it to be, because I thought, it's aliens, coming down to basically take over the world. But it was actually a pretty simpler solution than I thought it was going to be. Like, they were able to do it, and it wasn't super chaotic. It wasn't like a bunch of people died and stuff like that. It was like, no, they did like the epic hero thing, and they saved everybody. We had some cool stuff. The ending fight scene, they did have everybody come together. Everybody's doing something. Sarah's flying the ship with Cisco to get the bomb and try to stop it. Barry and Kara are basically going around the entire planet and putting these little nano devices on all of the Dominators on Earth. So that was actually kind of cool. They even had a reference to like, this looks like a job for Supergirl type of thing, so that was a cool little reference. I like the ending action sequence too. Like, everybody was fighting and stuff, and Barry's running around. I love the part where, I think it was Nate, and he punched one of the Dominators, and he flipped it in the air. And so it starts to go in slow motion, and Barry's running so fast, he just was running around, and he just went, whoop, and he basically stood still and just went like, here you go. And then he took off again. I just thought that looked really funny, because it's like he's moving so fast. It's almost like he's calmly just walking up to him and like, yep, okay, here it is, and here's that. And then he kind of, shot off again. So I like that part. I thought it was really cool watching everybody fight together. Oliver gets saved by Kara when he gets knocked off the building. She, swoops in and saves him, and they actually play the theme, which I thought that was actually kind of cool, because they played her theme. I was like, that's actually kind of cool to hear outside of her show. I just thought it was very interesting, because it's like, oh, they hadn't done that before. Like, she's been in, the crossovers, but they didn't have a moment where they really, like, played her theme in a different show. They may have done it, I think they did it in Flash when she, like, first shows up for everybody, but they didn't do it at all in Arrow. So I was like, that's actually kind of cool. They just had that little moment when she saves Oliver, and it plays her theme song. So I thought that was really cool. Love the ending fight scene. Love what they did with the Legends, because that was one of the big things with this crossover, is that everyone had their own focus. Even though it's a big crossover event, they still focused on the show that they were within. So, like, Flash had, Wally and his stuff, and it had the other characters, like Iris and Joe were there, but they don't show up. In the other two shows, Caitlin actually shows up again in this show because of Stein and him dealing with the stuff with his daughter. And I saw some speculation where people mentioned maybe his wife is dead, but now he has a daughter instead. And I thought that made a lot of sense, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. Based on how they did it in this episode, it seemed like that would have been something that came up. But it could be something that they're holding off, or something like that as a bit of a reveal later on. But I don't think that's the case. I think he still has his wife, but he also has a daughter now. So that was interesting, and it's technically an aberration. And I love that part when he was talking with Kaylin, and he was like, she is a stranger to me. Like, I didn't have a daughter when I left before, so. And he calls it like an aberration, and she's like, she's not an aberration, she's your daughter. And I was like, yeah, he can't think like that. It'll really F him up because he can't go back in time. They aren't allowed to go back in time to parts where they've already been for the Legends. For anyone who might not watch the Legends, that's something that they already they made a rule about that. Whereas like we can't jump back in time to places we already jumped back in time to because it'll collapse everything and all that type of stuff. So there's really not that much they could do anyway. I mean, I guess they could talk to his younger self a little bit after the episode they were in where he convinced himself, as Jefferson put it, which I thought was hilarious. He was like, you convinced him to go all the way to Pound Town. I thought that was really funny. But I thought that was interesting. It was like, he technically has an aberration, which I'm pretty sure everyone's going to find out at some point. It's like, oh, we were jumping through time. Like, everyone, who was there before, like Sarah and Ray, well, Mick probably wouldn't know that he didn't have a daughter, but at least Sarah and Ray would be like, okay, we know for sure you never had a daughter, so that's going to be something that they could figure out if they meet her. They'll be like, oh, you didn't exist. When did this happen? So I'm pretty sure that's going to come up at some point, if not this season, the next season, because it's like, that's an easy thing to figure out. Some of these characters do know that he didn't have a daughter before, so I'm not sure if that secret is going to be hidden forever, but at this point, it's something new. He has a daughter now, so I thought that was pretty interesting. Them just going through the story, of course it's Legend, so they have to find some way to jump through time, and Nate figures out that they need to go back to 1951, and that's where they go to the last battle of the Dominators versus the humans. They're able to get a Dominator, but they also find themselves getting captured by the government, and we find out that the guy that captures them is the older guy who's kind of mad and, pretty much hates metahumans at the end, and they don't really explain this outside of the aliens knew this, so I guess, it's the psychic thing, so they know everybody's identities. But the older guy, he's like, it's because of you, Mr. Allen, and Ray's like, he knows your name, so he knows who Barry is, and I was curious, I was like, does he know who everybody is, or did they only tell him, like, this is because of Barry, which I thought was interesting as well, because these alien creatures, basically it's like, oh, you alter the timeline, and that's kind of why they're here. It's like they perceive you to be a threat and stuff like that. And I thought that kind of doesn't make sense unless these aliens can travel through time as well. They wouldn't know, the stuff about Barry, going through the timeline. So I guess that was just supposed to be like, he was saying it's my fault because I changed the timeline. But there were metahumans before. It just wasn't as fast, and really I'd say that has way more to do with Eobard Thawne than it does Barry, because he's the one who kickstarted it like 20 years before it was supposed to happen. So really it's all his fault. He's the villain anyway, so they just put it all on him and it makes a lot more sense. But I like the way they did that. I thought it was cool that they had the sequence where it's like, alright, we're supposed to meet the president and stuff like that, and then this guy shows up and Barry goes around and he's he's flipping people around and stuff, and he's grabbing bullets and things like that. And fortunately, Ray gets shot, but it's just, it ricochets right off of him. So they had a pretty cool fight scene there, and I thought Ray was actually pretty cool in that fight, because I mentioned, if you saw the Arrow part of the crossover, he was getting his butt whooped during that virtual reality thing. He was just getting, like, kicked and flying all over the place. And in this one, he was actually able to fight against the guard, or the agent or whatever. And I thought it was cool. It was like, he was blocking and stuff, and like when the guy's shooting at him, he like put his arm up because he knows it'll just ricochet right off. So he's blocking him and he knocks it out. Oliver had like one of the coolest trick shots I've ever seen when he like shot the arrow at the ground under the car and it bounced up and hit the dude in the ankle. I was like, that is one of the coolest shots I've ever seen him do before. So I love that moment. That was like a 1 second little thing, but I rewound that for sure because I was like, that was awesome when he did that. So love that sequence for its action. And ultimately, everyone gets celebrated at the end. At least, just a little bit. The president is there and she celebrates them like as, the heroes that saved the planet. And I sadly don't think that it'll lead to too much because, of course, it'll go back to everyone being on their own shows and just being a bit dispersed. It won't be like, oh, it's, the Super Friends and all that stuff. But I still thought that was cool to see all them lined up and actually be recognized. It was a very Justice League type of moment where everyone is, recognized and it's like, these are the heroes that are on this planet. And it wasn't, televised, or not that I saw, there weren't, like any cameras. It was just certain official people. So I really love that. I thought that was very cool. And it was just a little taste, and of course they were at the Hall of Justice and everything, so it was fairly appropriate as well. But I certainly loved that, and everyone celebrates, at the end of the episode. And they have a very interesting moment with Ray, Felicity, and Kara, where Felicity's like, oh, it's like looking into a mirror. And Ray is like, you know what? She kind of looks like my cousin. And I think that was meant to be a reference. I don't think they're actually going to go anywhere with it, but I think that was kind of meant to be a reference to, like, Power Girl, who is like a different Earth counterpart of Supergirl. And they don't really look alike. They're just, that's who Power Girl is. She's like the Supergirl from a different Earth. But they don't really look anything alike. They both just happen to have blonde hair and blue eyes. So I doubt they're actually going to go anywhere with that, but it was just an interesting little note, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I don't know if it was meant to be a joke, that Ray might find his cousin attractive or something, because he and Felicity used to have a thing for a hot minute, and she mentioned, like, oh, Kara basically looks exactly like her, and he mentions that Kara also happens to look like his cousin, so Felicity somewhat looks like his cousin. I don't know if that was meant to be the joke there, but when I first heard it, all I thought of was, like, Power Girl and, different Earth counterparts. But then I was like, maybe that was kind of like a double thing in there, because Felicity looked at him a little weird. So I was like, maybe that was supposed to be the joke, and I was just thinking the nerd part of it, but there's another side of it as well. But I liked this finale. I thought it was pretty fun. The action was definitely good. Some of the cool scenes that they had, of course, the big moment where everybody's fighting together. Would have been cooler if it was people, because of course it was a bunch of CG aliens and stuff. Although I will say that I think this episode gave us our best look at the creatures, because they had like the one creature that the team saved in the past, and he was like laid out on the table, and I was like, this is actually cool, because typically it's just a bunch, but they're like kind of far away, or they're all running really fast and stuff. And we got to see them up close a lot in this episode, and I actually liked that. I was like, I love the design, because they look insanely creepy, because they have like almost like piranha-like teeth, where it's just, their teeth are just insanely long. They got, the big heads and stuff. They all have like little arm gauntlets for blasters and things like that. So it was kind of cool. I certainly enjoyed it. The way the Dominators reacted to metahumans and stuff like that, I actually thought was entertaining, because it was just like, hey, metahumans are bad. It was pretty much automatic. It was just like, yeah, they're good humans, but they kind of went the route of all metahumans suck because certain metahumans suck. It's like, hey, we're good guys, and we saved you from that crappy government guy. And it's like, yeah, but what if that crappy government guy was given powers just like yours? Like, what happens then? And that was pretty much it. It was kind of an absolute. It wasn't like, well, we have heroes here to counterbalance that. It was like, nope, they're bad guys with powers. The whole planet's got to go. Or at least all the metahumans do. Like, all metahumans have to go. And I thought that was interesting. But of course, it was like a super bomb, so it would have killed, they mentioned like 2 million people just in general. So it was like all metahumans, but also about 2 million normal humans as well, because it's like a super nuke going off. So that was interesting. I like the way they did that, and they rekindled the relationship. I shouldn't say rekindle, because that makes it sound like a way bigger relationship, but they rebuild the relationship between Cisco and Barry, because Barry goes along with the team, the Legends team in the past, he and Felicity, and they end up saving the creature, because it's like, hey, we need to prove to this alien that we aren't like other humans. And so, somewhat because of that, like, I felt like he kind of blamed himself, like, he put like all of it on them saving the alien, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure they were going to come back to Earth even if they didn't save that one alien, because it wouldn't have made that, it wouldn't have made any sort of difference, really. It would have just been that one alien that didn't get back. So he kind of put it all on himself, like, wow, like, I changed the past just like Barry did, and all I wanted to do was help and stuff like that. So he kind of realized it was just that one thing. Like, Barry, did it for himself, but Cisco did it for, like, a much lesser reason, and then he realized, like, oh crap, I changed all this stuff, and it was just to be like, yeah, we're nice, and that was it. And Barry did it for like a way more crucial reason, at least personally speaking. So Cisco kind of got over his anger with Barry, and he realized that they're friends and stuff. And it should be back to normal, which is nice because I prefer that. I know some people just were hating on Cisco. I was like, I seen some of the complaints like Cisco was whining and stuff, and I'm like, I feel like that's really unfair to say he was whining when he found out his brother was alive and then he was dead because of what Barry did. I'm like, I just can't see that as whining. It was just really weird to watch because Cisco, um, Cisco is Cisco, so he's typically so nice. But I'm like, I just, like, my girlfriend was like, Cisco's being stupid and stuff. I was like, I think that's super unfair because there's no way she would feel that way if that happened to her. Like, I don't think anyone would if that happened to them. And I'm like, I don't think it's really fair. Everybody saying like he's whiny and stuff. I'm like, if your brother was alive and you found out specifically the only reason he's dead now is because of Barry, it's like, that's not, you'd be mad too. Like, I think everyone would be mad unless they like totally hated their brother. I think everybody would be mad, and Cisco kind of did hate his brother a little bit. So, I personally, I was like, I hate seeing it just because it's like it's weird to see Cisco not like super jokey and happy all the time. But at the same time, I was like, yeah, I get that. Like, Barry is responsible for his brother dying, just like he's responsible for erasing baby Sarah from Diggle's life and stuff, little stuff like that. So, I didn't have that much of an issue with it as far as the character Cisco. I just didn't like it because of the circumstances of seeing Cisco not super funny and stuff like that. So, glad that that was fixed by the end of this. But ultimately, I'd say it was a good crossover. Cisco also builds Kara a nice little portal device, and it's like, oh, it has communications, so I'm sure they're gonna be utilizing that way more than, full on dimensional jumping. But that'll be pretty cool. It's like, hey, she can call up Cisco, from her show, and it's like, hey, we can't figure this out. Can you help us out here? Something like that. So I thought that was really cool. I was like, all right, they can make it much easier than normal. Just hop right over. Something's happening. Just poof, I'll show up here. We show up there. Whatever. So I like that. I'm sure that won't happen until the next season. They might do like, one crossover per season. It's kind of how they've been doing it lately. Or even since the beginning, really, they would do like one big crossover, like either per season or like every other season. But I'm excited to see what they do next time. They got, their big 4-part crossover. They were supposed to have a big crossover when Legends like first started up. They were supposed to have like a big 3-series crossover before Supergirl was on CW, and they never ended up using that because they have footage. If you go back and watch like the old Legends trailers, there's a sequence where Oliver and Barry are with the team, and like Barry's running around. It's almost like they're in like a plant or something, like a water plant, and they never used that footage. I guess they filmed like that one little scene because they were supposed to do a different story initially. And then the show like picked up its own steam, so it was like, oh, we don't need to do a crossover. So I guess they were like, well, let's just dump that and save a bunch of money instead of bringing like everybody in. So they were supposed to do that before, but this was when it finally happened. And like I said, it was 4 series, but it was really a 3-part crossover. Like, Supergirl's thing was totally different, so it makes sense. But that was a good finale to the crossover. We got a big action sequence, a lot like in the technically the second part for Flash, where we got all the heroes fighting each other and stuff. This, we got everybody doing something. We got all our heroes together. Everybody's fighting the Dominators. We got people on the ships, people in other locations doing random things like, hey, this is what's happening here. Felicity was doing her thing, keeping checks on the monitors. I don't know why Cisco was up in the ship with Sarah. I mean, I guess just because it's like, hey, you might be able to help. So I guess that's why he was there, because he was asking her, like, so what do we do? And she's like, no idea. So, it's funny. And him, I forgot what he was saying. It was something like, it's a really big bomb. He kept saying that. And she had to tell him, like, would you stop saying that? Because he was freaking out so much, which I thought was pretty funny. But I loved this episode. It was a really good finale to a nice epic crossover. Like I said, really the only thing I wish they did was have Supergirl in it a bit more, as well as Jefferson. Like, give him something to do, because he really wasn't in there at all. He just kind of showed up at the end, and then they had him for the fight sequence, because really he's the face of Firestorm. That was about it. So that was really, those are like my only 2 gripes. I was like, oh, we didn't get to see Supergirl and Jefferson as much, because everybody else was in it, and I guess it's because Jefferson really didn't have the whole crossover thing. He didn't have like anything to do. Like everybody had a role. Like even Mick had a really important role, and Jefferson kind of had the introduction, and him being Firestorm at the end of the Flash episode was kind of the same thing. He didn't show up in the Arrow stuff. A lot of people didn't for the Arrow crossover, and then in this, like I said, he didn't show up until like the end of it. So that's like the one weird thing is like he was the only person that seemed like he was really left out, and he came in the beginning with the Flash stuff, and he came in like at the end. He was like little bookends for his part of the crossover, and that was really it. So, other than that, I really enjoyed this crossover. I think they gave, like I said, outside of Jefferson, everybody had a good showing. Like, Mick was in this one. This was like his big part. He had some stuff in Flash too, like him just being stupid, like I'm not gonna call Supergirl and stuff like that. So I felt like everybody, for the most part, had their roles. They mentioned some stuff for future events, like Ray getting a new suit. They did that in Flash. Of course, Stein and Jefferson keeping the secret now that Stein has a daughter, which, like I said, I'm sure that'll come up very soon. It would have to, like, oh, hey, she didn't exist. What's happening. So, definitely had some seeds in there planted for the future of these shows. And of course, we're going into the mid-season finale for everything next week, so I'm actually super excited for that. Legends should be very entertaining. They're apparently having to deal with Al Capone becoming mayor, so that should be interesting to watch. But I enjoyed this. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about the finale to this 4-series crossover. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And now that we've had our epic crossover, I want to know if, you probably have to be a comic book fan, but I would love to know what big events you guys want to see them do in a crossover next. Like, there are a couple of things they could handle. They've done some references in Supergirl to some big stuff, but they can also just introduce a ton of huge things as well if they want to just do another crossover, which, like I said, probably won't be until next seasons for all the shows. But I would love to know what big events you guys would like to see them tackle. I would personally love to see them just deal with, like, anything big, like another, if they did, like, a crime syndicate thing, which is basically an evil Justice League. I would love to see that. Like, if they do all the rogues, maybe, or do, like, some alternate dimension rogues where they actually have the powers and stuff like that. So they're dealing with a bunch of actual supervillains all together, so they have to team up. I would love to see that instead of just aliens come down, just full-on actual villains all join together, and then all the heroes have to join together to beat them. That's my number one thing. Like, it just can't get better than that. But I'd love to know what events you guys would like to see in the crossover. And like I said, we'd love to know what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.